friends come and visit our studio. Catch them all in Muse Talks.
Hi, hello, and welcome to another episode of Muse Talks. And today, Muse Talks will be talking to a film director, an old friend of Muse, actually, Djinn. Welcome to the
Hello.
studio.
Welcome,
you.
Djinn.
And we
Welcome
have
to sunny Singapore.
Thank you.
Shah with us as well today. So Shah, since you're a good friend with Djinn, and Djinn has been working with you for a while as well, I'm sure you have a lot of questions to be asking him.
She has always had questions.
So how's it been for you, Djinn? Any new projects coming up?
Just depends, what the opportunity is.
Mm-hmm.
Then if so, then if it fits, then we move forward. It was the same with the two films, that I did so many years ago. Yeah.
How many years has it been since your first movie? When was that?
I started. The first film was a short film. I was in the US. I had previously been on Bugis Street as an assistant director.
Mhm.
The best assistant director according to the director. Then after that, because I never went to film school, I decided I better learn a bit more because before they find out I really don't know that much. And there was no film school in Singapore back then, so
Right.
I went over to do night classes in UCLA.
Mhm.
And I believe it was Eric Koo. He came over to LA one day with his young family at that point. And he's like, "Oh, what you doing here?" I'm like, "I'm studying more about film." And he's like, "Well, don't take too many classes because I spent 3 years in Australia studying film, and spending money, and all I learned was how to drink beer." It's like his advice to me would be like, "Oh, take the money you have and
Right.
make a short film." And I said, "Well, that's a great advice, So that's exactly what I did. I made a short film, and then I put it into the SIFF. And it won 98, best short film.
What's the
And
title of
that's
the film, Djinn?
By the Dawn's Early Rise. Nothing to do with Singapore,
Okay.
yeah. Then that kick-started the whole thing, got the ball rolling,
Right.
I guess, yeah.
So you didn't start in filmmaking industry.
No, not at all. I everything is by accident. I watched a lot of films when I was in university. Which was not what I was supposed to be doing. I was supposed to be learning something else. But the local cinema the art cinema was very compelling. So I spent a lot of time there, and then I graduated with a history degree.
Oh, wow.
Because I always want to do history. I remember in school, my teacher asked, who wants to do this? What do you want to do in later life? And I didn't put my hand up, and I was the kate ayam. I was the shortest. Right? So she looked at me. She's like, "Djinn, are you not concerned about where you want to go in the future?" I said, "I am, but I want to do history."
Wow.
So. She's like, "History is for the gangsters, the lower class. You don't want to go there, So after that, I did the history degree, and I came back to Singapore. And the first thing, I got into a taxi. My film was about a taxi driver, and for a reason, because the moment I was in the cab, he said, come home to Singapore, graduate or something from college." I said, yeah, I just did. And he said, "Oh, what do you do in university?" I'm like, I did history. He's like, "History? I'm like, "Alamak," the taxi driver is telling me that. So I don't know what was going to happen after that. But eventually I got into employment by Economic Development Board, strangely enough, because I didn't study economics, and they were developing creative industries, from theater, arts, to music, and they needed someone for film. I'm more invested in telling, stories, cultural
Yeah.
stories that don't get to see the light of day.
Right.
Like our stories here in Singapore.
Mm.
So that's how I got started. And with EDB, it was a steep learning curve. They were trying to revive a long dead hit, like a film industry.
Right.
Yeah.
So
I guess that was before there was Singapore film.
they had one film. It was called Medium Rare.
Right.
Medium
Rare,
yeah,
okay.
which
Still
became a
remember
running
that.
joke or something.
Mm.
But then I never seen it, so I can't really judge it. But then what happened was I get to meet the industry. We don't have much industry; it's very small. And I noticed like there was good filmmakers, short filmmakers like
Right.
Eric, but they, were just doing short films,
Yeah.
winning some awards here and there. So I said to my boss, I'm gonna go get stuck in, get my hands dirty. And luckily, I mean, it's all luck, I guess. Then I've been talking to Eric, and at the same time, another person I met in the EDB, Kathy Yu, she was producing a film. And she said, "Oh, I need a second assistant director. Do you think you can do that?" And I'm like, "Yeah, why not? Sound very fancy,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
atas, but I didn't know it was like bao ka liao basically. I do everything, So I got involved in that, and I kind of like on the side tried to help like Eric as well. It's just all very organic. Just everybody
Yeah.
trying to help each other, I guess.
Mm.
At that stage, that
Was that
wasn't
for
that
the
much.
film Boogie Street?
It was
that you
Boogie
were-
Street and Me Pok Man was shooting at around
Ah,
about the
right,
same
okay.
time. Yeah, so yeah.
Was there ever a worry in you, like, okay, I'm going into an industry, everybody says I can't make a living out of it in Singapore?
No. I'm young and foolhardy.
Right.
Just carry on and get it done. You know what? It's because I think for me, my temperament anyway. I think I didn't want to do when I was younger. I still don't know what I want to do now. But I do know that because like film production is like A and Z. It ends there, and I don't have to see everybody again
Right.
till the next project at least.
Right.
It suits me. I like the project basis. And I get super focused because maybe military training or I don't know what. I was also very good at just one mission. But you ask me to do something over and over again, go
Right.
to the same office, I get distracted. I cannot. I lose focus.
Right.
So it just suited me very well, and I'm very good. I found out at like kind of like emergency situation, which is always in film.
Firefighting.
Yeah, firefighting and just like on the cuff, like moving sideways, to get things done. Maybe again, I could be military training. I don't know. I think maybe it's my family because in my family also a lot of fires to fight. So it worked out.
Right,
It worked out. Yeah. And
So do you say that maybe that is one of the important skill set for a director to have, firefighting and
I mean, there are very different ways to directors, right? So I cannot like that those are very methodical.
Right.
They plan everything ahead. Your Alfred Hitchcocks or whatever, and there's so many different ways to be the director, and there's so many different how do you say, dynamics. Depending on your team, your producers are equally important. And all that, your crew and all that. So how something works, really, hard to say. Sometimes you get the right mix of producer, director, whoever else is involved, like the DP and all that. It just clicks and it works well. It's very hard to say. I mean, for me, it works for me because I can. Sorry, did I touch my mic? I can I can what do you call it? Improvise. And the problem with Singapore is there's not much budget in our film. So we don't have the luxury of like I can build an entire paddy field, and if it burns down, the studio is going to build the same thing for me
Yep.
again, and with the insurance or whatever. We just have to improvise. So whatever I wrote on script, well-intentioned and all that, it's going to change, when it goes to a shoot.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah.
I felt useful thing for me to have, to think on my feet
Right.
and very quickly
to adapt.
Yeah,
the
exactly.
environment,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. That's the added challenge here in Singapore when shooting back then anyway, yeah, you just have to adapt.
I was reading somewhere it says that in Perth, your film, taxi driver is the main character.
Yeah.
Was there like something you took from Scorsese's Taxi Driver?
I just felt because I was going to do the character as a cab driver anyway.
Right.
I felt there was some parallels that of course the two what do you call it? The two subject matters, are not the same because of their backgrounds. New York City is not 1970s, not gonna or 1970s.
70s.
78 is it? It's not going to be the same as Singapore, right?
Mhm.
But I just felt like there's some similarities in the fact he's trying to, write his life as well through a fantasy,
Mhm.
So in that way, I could say it's a homage or tribute to Taxi
Right.
Driver, but it wasn't a lot of people like misread it and
Mhm.
simplistically said, oh, it was an aping of Taxi Driver, and you
Right.
cannot do that because it's a Singapore story.
Yes, exactly.
So
Yeah.
unfortunately, my friends and one of my friends said, like, maybe it kind of damaged the film somewhat by
Mhm.
the comparison because some people just don't get it.
Mm.
And I was like, well, I don't not mean it to be an homage, I just
Alright.
think people don't understand the word homage too well. That's
Mhm.
all,
Mhm.
you know. But the inspiration, it comes from actually, deeper as from my family,
I see.
and an uncle that was a black sheep,
Right.
yeah.
Right.
And then as a vehicle, I thought the driver kind of like descend into chaos was a good way to kind of like frame it, and why not?
Sure.
Taxi drivers are very opinionated, as you know, with my first trip back after
Yeah.
college, so why not? Taxi
Right.
driver is the go-to if something goes wrong with your career or something, there's always that backup,
Taxi,
right?
yeah, true.
So
In Singapore's
yeah,
context, yeah.
yeah, you meet all sorts of characters as taxi drivers,
Mhm.
and I love talking to taxi drivers. I get an idea what people think on, like, and what things are going on and stuff like that. So it's the pulse of Singapore almost.
So as a film director, you guys don't just direct a written script, but you also are involved in the creation of the story. How much
Just
involvement is there?
I mean, yeah, because you will be developing the characters of the script and stuff like that. There are just certain ways you might want to take it, that have to change as you go along. So, for example, I mean, I talk from my context because I wrote Perth and stuff like that.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Our actors and pool is very small.
Mhm.
And I had to go and come like 6 months before the shoot to street cast,
Mm.
because I know I'm not gonna find the actors I
Mm.
want, and that's not a condemnation of actors in Singapore. It's just if you need a stocky Tamil like Indian
Mm.
taxi driver, you
Right.
cannot replace him with somebody else. That's the character you want to get if you can.
Mhm.
So it's hard. And then a lot of these people are like amateurs,
Mhm.
well intentioned and stuff like that. And
Mhm.
so how do you like work the script out, which is unfortunately mine was like me very dialogue-y
Mhm.
with someone like Lim Kay Tong,
Right.
who's a professional actor that can remember every single detail and line you give him,
Right.
and someone who's like off lip, that
Mhm.
is like off the street, like Sunny Peng,
Yeah.
who I found on the 2 days before shoot,
Oh,
literally
really?
shitting my pants. I'm like, where do I get this
Mm.
character?
Right.
And then I brought him in with K Tong, and I said, okay, well, let's test read, and
Yeah.
see how you guys deal with dynamics and stuff like that.
Mhm.
And of course, you tell Sunny, like, just remember the lines, but don't really remember it. Just
Mhm.
it's the feeling,
Right.
the
Right.
rasa, right?
Yeah.
Then deliver it the way you want to say it. I know you're gonna say a couple of like bad Chinese swear words for me. I mean, that's the gist, and that's it. And then then you have to look at K-Tong and go like, is he going to be able to counteract with this
Right.
guy, right?
Right.
Because this
Mm.
guy's gone off script, and K-Tong's thinking, and fortunately K-Tong's very professional. He's very good at like also improv from theater and stuff like that. So it worked out,
Yeah.
So very hard to say. I mean, the script changed,
Yeah.
yeah. So I imagine like if I was doing someone else's script, then of course, they will want it to be more, closer to thing. But everything is, cham siong compromise, right?
Yes, right.
Like in life and stuff like that.
Right.
You get the best like that.
Maybe back then was a bit more challenging than now because with like social media and all that, you
Mm.
can always get someone to audition or send you
Yes.
casting videos of.
Yeah, I mean, I walk the streets,
Yeah.
I mean, just recently coming back, I was just saying, like, I'm in a hotel in Balestier Road where our main location was. I walk the streets to location scout, I walk the whole Balestier Road, but I also walk the streets in Singapore every day to cast, because that was what I did in Bugis Street as well for the, the director, Yong Fan,
Mm-hmm.
always threw like a spanner in the works for me. It's like, Lei Chin, we need a new boyfriend for Lola. Well, how many boyfriends does Lola need? It's like, oh, Lei Chin, I need 10 naked men, 20 naked men for a shower scene. I'm like, do you really? And so, you gotta, you got to go and, improvise and find somebody. So like for my Perth, I said I gotta find this gangster guys and stuff like that.
Mhm.
I mean, I find like a guy on the MRT, finally that looks really like mean looking.
Yeah.
I'm like, wow, that guy looks really mean looking. I'm not very shy. I was like, okay, I'll go and approach him and ask him if he wants to be in a film or something like that.
Do you do that often?
Yeah.
Do you
Yeah,
ever
I
got
mean,
into
it's
trouble?
stereotype, but but then he's like, he turned out to be a makeup artist at TCS. I mean, then TCS. He's like,
Right.
sorry, conflict of interest. Oh my God, yeah. So
So looking back then and then now, the present, situation and environment, what are the challenges you think are now? It's easier back then or harder now?
I mean, it's easier now I think, because film shooting the thing, you're not on film, so it's much cheaper production wise. There's less excuse on that side,
Right.
you can get and almost at just about any. You can even shoot on a phone if you
Yeah,
want,
yeah.
and the editing, as Shah would know, like nowadays, you can make everything look good, fix it in post, which you don't like, and
No.
then of course the distribution side of it, you're not beholden to one or two distributors anymore. You got the world basically.
Yeah.
If you can collaborate with other places, your script or story has, like, let's say a Korean element, or someone from Indonesia.
Yeah.
These are big markets.
Yeah.
And you don't have to constrict yourself to just being a Singapore
Yeah.
only
Yep.
thing. If you want, that's fine. But then your budget can be dictated and bigger if you have
Yeah,
a
Jin, what's
bigger
stopping
market.
you? You're in LA for like how many years, now with
Me,
like internet and all that.
Yeah, I got distracted. Yeah, because my partner, she she did restaurants at the same time I was doing the film and stuff like that. I think I had to choose between two lifestyles, because then we had two little kids, and I felt like when I shoot here, I'm out here for 6-9 months. A different reality set in. My family is very far away. It's out of my mind, because that's I compartmentalize. And then the danger is I lose my family. And if I go back there, then the reality of a restaurant, a small struggling restaurant, is it's 24/7. I didn't like it, but it was what do you call it? Steady income, which she felt we needed, because kids were small, and I can understand that. I couldn't justify myself risking going out, on these things without
Sure.
a guaranteed return.
Yeah.
So much is a risk. So I decided, like, I'll try, and I tried for a bit to 2007, 2000. I was throwing some scripts out still and trying to get some projects going. But inevitably after a while, you're like, just seeing the next year, basically trying to get the kids, through to the next year and stuff like that. So yeah, it's different. I mean, in Singapore, I guess, you have the handicap of being small and not so many resources. But at the same time, you get to know everybody everywhere really quickly. You're 1 degree separated.
Right.
Yeah.
And for me, I kind of like that. I get lost in the whole big machinery of LA and stuff like that. The intimacy of, collaborating, working
Yeah.
with Shah and, other people here that I know of, even though it's a small knit group, it's almost easier for me, to I can walk across town real quick, get in an MRT and knock on the door, bang it down, like, hey, what's going on? LA, I was trying to get a script off the ground on Afghanistan. It was an Afghan Western, and I had this guy, a Russian director, Sergei Bodrov. He's actually from Kazakhstan, and I'm like trying to get just a coffee with him or something, and I have to go through his gatekeeper, which is his ex-girlfriend.
Oh, dear.
That's tricky as it is. And she's like, oh, you have to meet us in Dubai. And I'm like, what? You just live up the road, it's just crazy,
Right, right.
So after a while, you get tired of playing that game,
Yeah.
and I'm not very good at that as
Yeah.
well, So plus the fact, I think, looking back, I had a producing team, for Perth and for Return to Pontianak, but it all the kind of frayed and disappeared after that, and I really needed a producer, I guess, to kind of help as well, to shoulder the burden,
Yeah.
Right.
and
Sounds like you're a one-man operating
yeah, you can.
team.
I have to go and sell myself and
Right.
sell the thing and this and that. It's just after a while, it's very difficult.
Mm.
And I always say, to people here, like, the one thing we're lacking here is producers, good creative producers. And the one thing that doesn't help is we don't incentivize the producers by helping them get a good return on the projects,
Yeah.
Sure.
giving them
I
the leg
agree.
up, So that is
Really.
the main issue. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, Jin, can you tell us about the element of some Cambodian influence in the film?
I mean, there was a small sequence on Cambodia, which I actually planned to be a bigger sequence, but no budget. But it was all related to me by experience because the main character, Harry Lee, which is based on my uncle, experience was as a sea, first mate on a commercial shipping, which was a kind of a lifeblood of Singapore, back in the day,
Yes.
and a lot of, people that in his generation, they left school, spoke a certain way because of the colonial like English schooling, but never really completed their O levels or whatever,
Right.
and then had to go to work as pioneer generation,
Mm.
and they went overseas, to in shipping lines or whatever, and came back, and a lot of people, they don't even remember these guys. It's like something that's underneath the surface that people don't think about, but these are experiences that are kind of rich, I thought, and my uncle always told me about his, shipping law, I guess. I mean, maybe it's more embellished than anything, but I was always ears, and he was always like, he went to Vietnam several times, and because all the supply side for the Vietnam War was coming out of Singapore by shipping, and on occasion he would have to go up the Mekong, right? There was danger pay, so you get paid like I don't know, double, triple, whatever.
Right.
So some people like him, foolhardy enough, will volunteer for it, and they would do the Mekong run. They will, the Khmer Rouge or Cambodians will shoot at them from the banks with RPG and stuff like that.
Wow.
The
Wow.
boats are reinforced. None of the crews are all expendable,
Oh.
and they have to run supplies to Phnom
Right.
Penh,
Right.
from I guess would be at now Ho Chi Minh City. Then it was like Saigon, right? Yeah. So I thought it'd be interesting to put it in, and his kind of unrequited love with some Cambodian lady, which I didn't really go
Right.
into depth with, comes back to haunt him, because he left her there and he's wondering, what happened to her and what could have been, because his current relationship is, falling apart.
Right.
And then, always things look rosier, right? When you look back with tinted glasses and you're looking back at that thing,
Yeah.
he's wondering, is that the junction which I could have found some happiness with this
Yeah.
lady instead, of course it's all conceited, maybe
Right.
he feels he can control the Cambodian lady more than he can control his more kind of like feisty wife,
Yeah.
Chinese wife. But I thought that will play into the character, and the regret, that he manufactures for himself, that then eventually gets triggered when he sees the unfortunate Vietnamese prostitute
Yeah.
that knows nothing more about all this stuff and
Right.
his bigger goals in life, and so that's the trigger, I guess, that gets pulled in his memory as he's getting older and wondering, where the hell have I gone in my life, and stuff like that. Yeah.
Is your uncle
Interesting.
still around?
Yes, he is. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
has he seen Perth?
Yeah, I invited him for the opening night of SIFF when it was showing,
Right.
and I made it a point to go to Ang Mo Kio to fish him out because he's very hard to find, and
Right.
he was in one of these I guess food courts in the back area of Ang Mo Kio where all the seamen like to hang out. He says,
Oh.
he said, come and get me there, and I went at 9 o'clock and he had 9 bottles of Tiger, the
Oh,
big
wow.
one, open and finished.
man.
And he said, "You can buy me a beer." And the funny thing is, like, he's very dark. I think because my family side, from my mom's side, we were from Pontianak. I mean, one of the grandparents, I think, used to wear kabaya and stuff like that. We don't know if she was, what background she was, whether she was Dayak or whatever. But my uncle's very dark. It doesn't look very Chinese at all.
But
He's a
maybe because
complete
he's always
Teochew.
at sea back then, right?
Plus that,
Yeah,
I mean, it's just permanently dark, and so he's like me, wear sunglasses, just sit there with the 9 bottles. And then the Tauke came out and then started conversing to him in Malay.
Oh.
And then, wow, pagi-pagi sudah minum, blah, 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 started,
Oh, okay, so 9 a.m.
9
Yeah,
a.m.
9
He was
a.m.
there
I thought it was
earlier.
9
He was there
p.m.
earlier. It's not 9
Okay.
a.m. It's already like the end. And the uncle just looked at this guy. This guy kept going in Malay. He was looking at him with his sunglasses. And then about 10 minutes into whatever this guy was saying, he's like, "Teng nang na," which is like, "I'm Teochew" or something, right?
Right.
But yeah, I mean, so it's kind of like, he's just a odd character. I thought, it's a texture from the past, right? And he's absorbed all this like worldly things and stuff like that, that I felt, yeah, it's interesting to explore and highlight. So I took him to the opening. I made sure he got in a cab. I
Yeah.
gave him his cab money, everything. He turned up, along with, I think, Mabotan or something. He also turned up, not at the same time, but not in the same cab.
Oh, right.
Okay. I was just wondering.
Yeah, they wouldn't get along.
They were schoolmates or something.
Yeah, two unlikely pair, like, "Oh, you want to share cab? Yeah, okay.
Mabotan.
Want a tiger?" So yeah, they turned up and he turned up and I sat him in there and watched the film, and then at the end I said, "Well, what do you think?" I was thinking, does this trigger anything? He's like, "Oh yeah, I know people like that."
He didn't have the clue at
No
all.
clue,
Okay.
no clue, yeah.
Oh, that's
Bless
funny.
him, yeah. I said,
Maybe,
"This is
okay,
for
just
you."
take it that he was a bit tipsy.
Yeah.
One tiger too many.
He's probably better tipsy than when he's sober.
Right.
That sort of person. Yeah.
Just now off camera, you were mentioning about the experience of the screening at the Cannes.
Yeah,
Can you
I-
tell us about the audience?
Yeah, because I was, as we were saying, I had the film in the market in Cannes. Yeah, and you always wonder, is your film very colloquial? Because Perth is a very Singapore film, and how it translates to other people looking in from overseas and stuff like that. Because as I was saying before as well, I'm into making Singapore films because I feel our voice is never heard, even though we're first world. Sometimes we're like the third world in terms of our voice, at least at that point, So I want to make sure people hear and the voices that I hear in Singapore that I'm so familiar with. And Singaporeans also know that people overseas will watch it and find the charm in it without being embarrassed about their own accent or whatever. So I was in Cannes, and after the screening or during the screening, as with these market things, some people walk out, not their cup of tea and whatever. But at the end of it, at the very end, there was a bunch of 18, 19-year-old, I guess, French inner city kids, blacks, Moroccans, a whole mix. And they sat all the way to the end of the credits. And then it came out, and then the French handler, he was saying like, "Oh, we get these kids to come out from the inner cities to expand their horizons so they see other things, and they watch your film and they really enjoyed it." And I don't speak so much French, but they said, "Oh, we really relate to it because we have a relative, we know an uncle that seems very similar."
Right.
So I'm like, okay, that's great because you're touching someone somewhere very far away in an inner city, and they still understand the same things that somebody will be under pressure here in Singapore.
Right.
So that's gratifying for me as a
Yeah.
filmmaker.
Yeah.
That sort of interaction. Yeah.
Okay, you mentioned also about Singapore lacking in its identity. That is one of the
Yeah, we
reason
talked about
difficult to promote in a movie.
Yeah, because like we were saying, if you think of certain cinema from certain countries, that's a certain look and style. But us Singaporeans were so exposed to the four winds, that there's a temptation to go here, go there, and there's no reason to stop you from,
Right.
being this. And then I did mention, when I was working at EDB, so one of the portfolios to kind of help the music industry. And again with the music, that there wasn't really a Singapore sound per se. There was a grunge thing going.
Right.
Some people were doing heavy metal, punk. Some people were doing folk. Some people doing Chinese. Some people doing DK Barat. You got the works. So what is Singaporean music? It's so hard. Then you have like was that Rain of the Forest, or then all these kind of mixed medium, like Singapore things. And it's the same in the film, I guess. For a while I was thinking like, how does Singapore film play overseas? And then I thought like, okay, I guess like our first generation of films like Me Pork Man, Eating Air,
Yep.
Perth. There's this kind of like feeling of like the showing the underbelly of Singapore kind
Yeah.
of thing, and some angst and stuff like that. Of course, like hopefully that evolves to something else.
Right.
But that's the thing. I felt like to show that overseas,
How about Jack
in a
Neal's
hum-
films? Don't you
Jack,
think
I
that?
love Jack Neo actually. I really enjoy Liang Po Po. I'm ashamed to say. I shouldn't be ashamed to say. I really enjoy Liang Po Po.
Yeah.
That always cracks me up.
Yeah.
It's a different thing altogether. But
Yeah, that's the thing, because
Yeah.
you mentioned that
It's-
it's very hard to identify a Singapore film, but I
Yeah.
think he manages, right?
He does. He
Yeah.
does. He does. And I get it at once, and I really enjoy it. So the thing is, how do you translate it overseas? And get a wider audience. Nowadays, I think it helps, right? Because on Netflix and the new like platforms and stuff like that, I'm seeing more and more like in what they used to call niche product
Yep.
from all sorts of places.
Yep.
And they turn up, and I think like sitting in the US. In the old days, the US audience would not see anything that's not what do you call it, like dubbed, which I hate, but now everything is like closed caption,
Yeah.
the kids
Yep.
are used to that,
Yeah.
or translated in subtitles and stuff like that. They don't mind reading. They finally learned to read in the US, so it kind of helps, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a different world we live in now. It's much more opportunities. You can tell those niche stories, and somebody might just click on it, just
Yeah.
out of like curiosity, especially I think because of pandemic. There was a lack of travel
Yeah.
or ability to travel.
Yeah.
So your traveling around the world became your couch, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But that's not a bad thing. You get to showcase a lot of films that otherwise won't be seen in certain markets. And because those markets don't dictate it as heavily anymore, there's a bigger opportunity, a bigger pie around the world for local films like in Singapore to see the light of day, I think.
Sure.
How you get it financed, of course, is always the critical issue. That's a different thing altogether.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So after going through all these years, your children come up to you, Daddy, I'm going to be in the film industry. What do you say?
Yeah, go ahead. I cannot preach, right? Yeah. I mean, my son doesn't really know what he wants to do for college. I mean, he still got a year to go. But I don't really know what I want to do either. So I have to bite my tongue.
Yeah.
How can you preach if you don't do the same thing? Yeah.
That's very true. Thank you, Djinn.
Yeah.
Thank you. Before we let you go,
Yeah.
there's a short 5-question quiz. Only one word answer is needed,
Oh my God. Okay.
right? First one, film, short or long?
Long.
Okay.
I have a
Number-
lot to say.
Number 2, for food, Asian or Western?
Asian. I
Yeah.
think my system is racist.
Okay. Number 3, weather, hot and wet, cold and dry.
Neither.
Neither?
Yeah. I like cold and wet. I mean, a lot of people don't like cold and wet, but I like cold and wet.
All right. The next one is style, colorful or monotone.
Well, I'm in monotone right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I notice about people in the industry.
Yeah,
Black, gray.
but I can put on the color. Yeah.
Hold on. Okay, the last one. What's that? Oh, movie watching. Home or cinema?
Home.
Home.
Yeah, I love the cinema, but
Over the years?
It's okay. I don't mind going to the cinema, but then Ape in the front, scratching his girlfriend's
whatever.
butt.
What?
And
How can you say
I
that?
mean, and then every half an hour I have to make some sort of
Which cinema are you?
I go cheap lah. I go umbrella cinema. I don't know what's going on in front. It's kind of distracting. Yeah, I don't know why I always have
I think
someone
those
like that.
activities are banned these days.
Is it? You can ban it all you like, but these guys are the true rebels. You cannot stop them. I don't know why there's always one. Yeah.
Okay, we hope to see more of your work in the near future. Maybe.
hope so too.
Yeah.
Hope to see you more
Yes.
in the scene in Singapore.
That way we can have more jobs too. Thanks.